shift and factors contributing to it. Language shift is a social phenomenon whereby one language replaces another in a society due to underlying changes in the composition and aspirations of the society. Language shift means the process or the event in which a population changes from using an old language to a new one. According to Hoffman in 1896, language shift is always preceded by multilingualism. Language shift is totally different from language change. Language shift is a social phenomenon whereby one language replaces another in a given society. On the other hand, language change can be seen as evolution or the transition from older to newer forms of same language. Language shift results in the spread of the new language that is adopted and may result in endangerment or loss of the old language. Language shift may be an object of conscious policy, but equally it may be a phenomenon which is unplanned and often unexplained. Factors contributing to language shift. The reasons are often economic, social, and political. There are also factors contributing language shift such as demographic factors, attitudes, and values. First is economic factor. Language shift often reflects the influence of economic factors such as the need for work. People may shift both locations and language for this reason. Obtaining work is the most obvious economic reason for learning another language. In English-dominated countries, for instance, people learn English in order to get good jobs. This results in bilingualism. Second is the social factor. There is pressure from the wider society. Immigrants who look, sound different are often regarded as threatening by majority group members. There is pressure to conform in all kind of ways. Language shift to English, for instance, has often been expected of migrants in predominantly monolingual countries such as England, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Speaking good English has been regarded as a sign of successful assimilation.
Good morning, everyone. Let's tackle about political factor. A rapid shift occurs when people are anxious to get on. In a society where knowledge of the second language is a prerequisite for success, political factor imposes on a language shift. In a multilingual country, the authority usually chooses one language as the lingua franca to unify various kinds of ethnic groups. Consequently, the number of ethnic language speakers decreases. For example, the official language of many African countries were determined by their former colonialists. Philippines is also a multilingual country. There are 170 languages and dialects in the country. Let's move on to demographic factor. First, demographic factor plays the role in the process of language shift. When there is a community speakers moving to a region or a country whose language is different from theirs, and there is a tendency to shift to the new language. Every time an immigrant learns the native language of the new country and passes it down to children in place of the old country language. For example, I was born in Solo, so my mother tongue is Javanese, which was used as the language in my former neighborhood and the medium of instruction in my elementary school. Now, I moved to Jakarta. Since then, I only use Javanese at home with my family and Javanese neighbors, because there is a high frequency of contact with people coming from different ethnic groups who use Bahasa Indonesia. I gradually shift from Javanese to Bahasa Indonesia. This is clear evidence that demography is an influence factor in language shift. Resistance language shift tends to last longer natural than urban areas because rural groups tends to be isolated from the centers of political power for longer, and the rural people can meet most of their social needs in the ethnic or minority language. For example, Ukrainians in Canada who live out of town on farms have maintained their ethnic language better than those in the towns because of their relative social isolation. The last one is attitudes and values. Language shift tends to be slower among communities where the minority language is highly valued. When the minority group support the use of the minority language, it helps them to resist the pressure from the majority to switch language. Negative attitudes towards the language can also accelerate language shift. It occurs when where the ethnic language is not highly valued and is not seen as symbol of identity. To sum up, language shift is an inevitable linguistic phenomenon. The factors where trigger the shift vary from the one language community to another. Some of them are demographic attitudes and values, economic and social and political factors.
Hi everyone, I'm Christine Joy Estacio from Group 2B, and I will be discussing about how can a minority language be maintained. But before I discuss how can we maintain the minority language, let us first define what is minority language. So a minority language is a language spoken by a minority of population of a territory. Such people are termed linguistic minorities or language minorities. There are several ways for us to maintain minority language. First one is if the minority language is considered as an important symbol of a minority group's identity, the language is likely to be maintained longer. So the second one is the language also can be maintained if families from a minority group live near each other and see each other frequently, or if they have frequent contact with their homeland. Here are some examples of how can we maintain a minority language. In America, Chinese people who live in Chinatown, areas of big cities, are much more likely to maintain Chinese dialect as their mother tongue through the third generation than those who move outside the Chinatown. The next example is Polish people have regarded language as very important for preserving their identity in the many countries they have migrated to. And they have consequently maintained 3 to 4 generations. It is clear that social factors may help resist the influence of economic pressures, where the normal family of organization for an ethnic group is the extended family with grandparents and unmarried relatives living in the same house as the nuclear family. So, for example, there is a good reason to continue using the minority language at home, and there is no issue for that, right? Similarly, groups which discourage intermarriage, such as the Greek and the Chinese communities, to contribute language maintenance in this way. Obviously, a group who manage to ensure their language is used in settings such as school or their place at worship will increase the chances of language maintenance. And that's all for my topic. Thank you.
Shalom, let us now move on to language revival. Language revitalization, language revival, or reversing language shift is the attempt by the interested parties, including individuals, cultural or community groups, governments, or political authorities, to reverse the decline of a language. While language death, well, from the word itself, we come to know that this language is no longer used by the people who spoke it before. How these languages die? The most common way in which language dies is when communities become bilingual and gradually shift their allegiance to their second language. This can happen very often with smaller native languages in which the speaker must learn a more widely spoken language to advance socially and economically. Such circumstances can cause smaller languages to gradually die out over generations. Now that we have the knowledge about the dead languages, we also need to know about bringing the dead back to life. For instance, the Israel revived Hebrew after being effectively dead for nearly 1,700 years. It had been survived for prayers and reading the scripture. Other examples of it are the Ainu from Hokkaido, Japan, and then we have also the Manchu in China, the Quechua in Peru, Hawaiian in Hawaii, and we have the Cornish in United Kingdom, and many more. The language can be revived through television channel or bilingual education program. The bilingual education programs start from preschool to tertiary level. An effective bilingual schooling has generally involved a process known as immersion. Children are immersed in the language and it is used to teach them science, math, and social studies. They are not taught the language, but rather it is used as a medium of instruction to teach them the normal school curriculum. There is clearly no magic formula for guaranteeing language maintenance or for predicting language shift or death. Language revitalization is more important now than it has never been. We do not want to proceed to see a world with only a handful of languages, right? Thank you.